Jeremy Lusk was one of those fearless athletes who seemed invincible, soaring through the air on his dirt bike, defying gravity with every backflip and heart-stopping trick. But on one fateful day in Costa Rica, what started as a thrilling motocross competition quickly turned into a nightmare. As he launched into a trick he had mastered countless times before, something went wrong, and Jeremy's life came crashing down with him. How could a legend like him, at the height of his career, face such a devastating end? Jeremy Lusk was born in San Diego, California on November 26, 1984, and from the very beginning, it was clear he was destined for something big. At just 3 years old, while most kids were playing with toy cars, Jeremy was already riding dirt bikes. For him, it wasn't just a childhood activity, it was the spark that would ignite a lifelong passion. He wasn't the type of kid who just rode for fun on weekends. Dirt biking was in his blood, and as he grew older, that passion only intensified. By the time Jeremy turned 19, his commitment had paid off. He became a professional rider. This wasn't just a small accomplishment. For someone so young to break into the competitive world of freestyle motocross, FMX, was a huge deal, and it wasn't long before he started making waves. At the age of 21, he achieved a milestone that many riders only dream of: mastering the backflip. It's one of the most challenging tricks in FMX, and Jeremy handled it like a pro. The backflip, which involves flipping the bike mid-air while holding onto it with precision, put Jeremy on the map and showed the world he wasn't just another rider. He was a force to be reckoned with. In 2006, Jeremy's talent caught the eye of Metal Militia, an elite FMX team known for pushing the boundaries of the sport. Joining their ranks was a pivotal moment in his career. Metal Militia was more than just a team. It was an attitude, a lifestyle. At that time, freestyle motocross was associated with a party-heavy culture where riders would spend nights drinking and still show up at competitions the next day. But Jeremy wasn't like that. His dedication and discipline set him apart. While others might have been out late, Jeremy was in the gym, practicing tirelessly and honing his craft. He was focused on perfecting his tricks and becoming the best, steering clear of the distractions that surrounded many in the sport. In the early days of freestyle motocross, the sport had a bit of a wild reputation. Riders were known for living fast both on and off the bike. Late nights, parties, and showing up to competitions on pure adrenaline were almost part of the culture. It was seen as an extreme lifestyle to match the extreme sport. But things began to change, and Jeremy Lusk was one of the key figures who helped shift that mindset. He, along with a few other top riders, started bringing a new level of professionalism and discipline to FMX. Jeremy wasn't interested in the partying scene that often came with being an FMX rider. Instead, he focused on his craft. He was known for his dedication, spending countless hours in the gym and on the bike, fine-tuning his skills. Riders like Jeremy began to show that the sport wasn't just about taking risks and pushing limits. It was also about preparation, fitness, and a relentless work ethic. This wasn't a guy who just showed up at the ramp and hoped for the best. He trained hard, constantly practicing new tricks and techniques to get better. His approach was more like that of a serious athlete rather than someone just out for thrills. Competing in the X Games, the most prestigious event in FMX, Jeremy didn't just participate, he dominated. That year, he won a gold medal in the freestyle category, pulling off incredible tricks that left the crowd and judges in awe. It was the pinnacle of any FMX rider's career, and Jeremy had earned his spot at the top. But he didn't stop there. Along with his freestyle win, Jeremy also earned a silver medal in the best trick competition. This wasn't just any second place finish either. He attempted and successfully pulled off a double grab heart attack backflip, a trick so daring and complex that it left no doubt about his skills. The trick combined the difficulty of a full backflip with an acrobatic extension of his legs mid-air, a move that only the most fearless riders would dare to attempt. For Jeremy, though, pushing the boundaries of what was possible on a dirt bike was what he lived for. He wasn't content with just playing it safe. He wanted to redefine what FMX riders could do. On February 7th, 2009, the energy at the X-Nights competition in Costa Rica was electric. Fans were eager to see some of the best freestyle motocross riders in the world perform jaw-dropping stunts, and Jeremy Lusk was one of the main attractions. Coming off an incredible year in 2008, where he won gold and silver at the X Games, Jeremy was at the peak of his career. But that day, something felt off. The ramps didn't feel quite right to him, and the wind inside the stadium was swirling unpredictably. These conditions were far from ideal, especially for the high-risk tricks that riders like Jeremy had planned. He shared his concerns with another rider, noting that the ramps were a little tricky, but despite his reservations, he chose to compete. As the competition got underway, Jeremy, known for his daring spirit, decided to go for a trick that had given him trouble before: the heart attack backflip. It was a move he had struggled with in the past, but being Jeremy, backing down wasn't an option. The heart attack backflip was one of the most dangerous tricks in the sport, involving not only a full backflip, but also the rider extending their legs underneath the bike mid-air before flipping back into position for the landing. It was a move that only a handful of riders could pull off, and Jeremy had already proven he could do it. But that day, as he launched off the ramp and soared through the air, something went terribly wrong. In mid-flip, Jeremy over-rotated, and instead of landing smoothly, he crashed head-first into the ground. The impact was brutal, so strong that his helmet split in two on impact. The stadium fell silent as fans and fellow riders realized the seriousness of the crash. Jeremy lay motionless on the ground, and it was immediately clear this was no ordinary fall. Medical personnel rushed to the scene, and Jeremy was quickly placed on a stretcher and taken to the hospital. The situation was critical. He had suffered severe brain trauma, and doctors scrambled to perform emergency surgery to relieve the swelling in his brain. His family, friends, and teammates from Metal Militia gathered at the hospital, waiting for any sign of hope. For hours, they held vigil by his side, praying for a miracle. On February 10th, 2009, the motocross world was shaken to its core. At just 24 years old, Jeremy Lusk passed away after fighting for his life following a devastating crash at the X-Nights competition in Costa Rica. He was surrounded by his family, his wife, and close friends from Metal Militia. But despite the love and prayers that filled the hospital room, the injuries he suffered were simply too severe. Jeremy had sustained irreversible brain damage from the impact, and his body couldn't recover from the trauma. After undergoing emergency surgery to reduce brain swelling, it became clear that the damage was far too extensive. Over the next few days, his condition only worsened, and eventually his heart gave out. The world lost not just an incredible athlete, but a person whose passion and dedication left a lasting impact on everyone he met. The news of Jeremy's death sent shockwaves throughout the freestyle motocross community. He was one of the first professional FMX riders to lose his life as a result of an injury sustained during competition, a stark reminder of just how dangerous the sport could be. FMX had always been a high-risk game, with riders performing death-defying stunts for both glory and personal satisfaction. But Jeremy's passing hit different. It wasn't just a terrible accident, it was a sobering moment that made everyone. For those in the FMX world, Jeremy wasn't just another rider. He had earned his place at the top through sheer hard work, fearless determination, and a commitment to pushing the limits of what was possible. His tragic end left a huge void, not only because of his talent, but because of the person he was. Humble, dedicated, and kind-hearted. Riders who had shared the stage with him, like Brian Deegan and Kyle Loza, were heartbroken, grappling with the reality of losing one of their own. Jeremy's death also led to serious discussions within the FMX community about safety. Many began to question whether competitions, especially smaller ones outside the US, had the proper safety measures in place to protect riders from these kinds of devastating accidents. There were concerns about the conditions Jeremy faced in Costa Rica, the wind, the ramps, and whether the event should have been postponed given the circumstances. But in a sport like freestyle motocross, where pushing boundaries is the very essence of what riders do, the line between risk and safety has always been thin. He was someone who left a lasting mark on everyone around him, not just as an athlete, but as a person. People who knew Jeremy remember him not just for his fearless riding, but for his humility and the love he had for his family. He was a dedicated husband, deeply devoted to his high school sweetheart, and a man of faith who didn't let the spotlight of fame change who he was at his core. His work ethic and commitment to improving day in and day out made him not just a role model, but an inspiration to countless up-and-coming riders who wanted to follow in his footsteps. Jeremy wasn't just an FMX star, he was a mentor and a friend. Whether he was practicing in Brian Deegan's backyard or showing support to fellow riders, he was always approachable and willing to help others. That's what made him special. He had an undeniable talent, but it was his character that stood out. Riders who came after him didn't just look up to him for his technical skills, they admired the way he carried himself, both on and off the bike. What made Jeremy's life and career so powerful was the way he pushed the boundaries of what freestyle motocross could be. He was never satisfied with just being another rider in the crowd. He wanted to be remembered as someone who took the sport to new heights, literally and figuratively. His willingness to push himself to attempt tricks that others wouldn't even dare to try showed just how dedicated he was to becoming more than a medal winner. He wanted to be an icon, someone whose name would live on in the history of FMX. Freestyle motocross has always been a sport that embraces risk. Riders launch themselves into the air, performing gravity-defying tricks that push the limits of what's possible on a motorcycle. But with that thrill comes an undeniable danger, something Jeremy Lusk's tragic death brought into sharp focus. His passing wasn't just a personal loss for his family and friends, it forced the FMX community to take a hard look at the risks riders face every time they get on their bikes. For a long time, accidents were considered just part of the game in freestyle motocross. Riders knew that every trick came with the potential for injury, and many had scars and stories to show for it. But Jeremy's death changed the conversation. It was a sobering reminder that the stakes in this sport can be much higher than anyone would like to admit. Fellow riders were deeply affected. Kyle Loza, a fellow FMX athlete and member of Metal Militia, put it into perspective when he said, "Our sport is the riskiest of all action sports, but we know exactly what we're doing. You can get hurt doing anything. It's one of those things that happens when God calls your name." His words reflected a reality that every FMX rider understands. The line between pushing the envelope and disaster is razor thin. Jeremy's accident also raised important questions about safety, especially in smaller competitions like the X Nights event in Costa Rica. While major events like the X Games have strict safety standards in place, there were concerns that smaller international competitions didn't always meet those same standards. The ramp that Jeremy launched from wasn't giving riders the right lift, making it harder to complete rotations and land safely. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.